Since Helldivers 2 came out, the game has gotten some new bad guys. These new enemies have really changed how players think about the game and what they bring with them on missions. For example, there are these bug enemies called chargers. They're super annoying because they never stop coming at you. They just keep charging and charging, which can make missions really tough. Then there are the robot missions. These have gotten even harder lately because of new enemies like factory striders and gunships. These big, scary machines make players think twice about how they're going to tackle a mission. All these new enemies make players change their plans. They have to think carefully about what weapons and special tools, called stratagems, they'll bring on a mission. It's like packing for a trip. You need to think about what you might face and pack accordingly. Now, it looks like Helldivers 2 is about to add a whole new group of enemies. This isn't totally new. It's actually bringing back some bad guys from the first Helldivers game. This is pretty exciting because it could really shake things up. Adding a new enemy group is a big deal in a game like this. It's not just about having new things to shoot at. It changes how players work together, what strategies they use, and even what parts of the game they focus on. For example, maybe these new enemies will be really tough against certain weapons. That could make players try out guns they didn't use much before. Or maybe these enemies will have special abilities that make certain stratagems more useful. Helldivers 2 has been doing great with its two main groups of bad guys, the bugs and the robots. These enemies have kept players busy and challenged since the game started. Even though new enemies might be coming soon, it's important that the game doesn't forget about these original baddies. They're like the foundation of a house. You need them to keep everything stable. Now, because Helldivers 2 is a game that's always changing, we call this a live service game, the people who make it need to keep tweaking things. It's like taking care of a garden. You need to keep watering it and pulling out weeds to make sure everything grows right. Sometimes they might make certain weapons stronger or weaker, or change how many enemies show up in a mission. This helps keep the game fun and fair for everyone. But there's another way to keep the game exciting, by adding new types of enemies. This is like adding new rides to an amusement park. It gives players something fresh to look forward to and makes them think about new ways to play the game. Maybe they'll need to use different weapons or work together in new ways to beat these new enemies. Now, let's talk about samples. In Helldivers 2, samples are super important. They're like treasure that players collect during missions. You can use them to get better gear and make your character stronger. But here's the thing. Sometimes during big, crazy fights, players might drop these samples and can't pick them up right away. It's like dropping your wallet in the middle of a busy street. The person who wrote this article thinks there's a missed chance here. They have an idea for a new type of enemy, one that could steal these dropped samples. Imagine you're in the middle of a huge battle, bullets flying everywhere, and suddenly you see this sneaky enemy snatching up your hard-earned samples. It would be like a pickpocket in the middle of a war zone. This new sample thief enemy could make the game even more exciting and nerve-wracking. Players would have to make quick decisions. Do they chase after the thief to get their samples back, or do they keep fighting the other enemies? It would add a whole new layer of strategy to the game. Adding this kind of enemy could be Helldivers 2's biggest challenge yet. It would give players something new to worry about during every mission, keeping them on their toes and making the game feel fresh and unpredictable. It's ideas like this that can help keep a game exciting long after it first comes out. Right now, players in Helldivers 2 have come up with a clever trick for dealing with super samples. These are really valuable items that are hard to find and important to collect. Here's what players do. When they find super samples, they stop whatever they're doing. They take these samples to the evacuation site, where their ship will pick them up at the end of the mission. Instead of keeping the samples, they leave them on the platform at the evacuation site. The idea is that this way, someone can grab them quickly when everyone is rushing to get on the ship at the end of the mission. Why do they do this? Well, it's because carrying super samples can be dangerous. If you're carrying them and you die, you lose them. And there are lots of ways to die in this game. You might get killed by a big enemy like a bile titan. Your own teammate might accidentally hit you with a powerful weapon like a nuke. You could die while trying to do other mission tasks, like loading a big gun or setting up a bomb. This strategy has been working well, but it's not perfect. Sometimes, when it's time to leave, the evacuation site is swarming with enemies. This can make it really hard to grab those samples before jumping on the ship. Now imagine if the game added a new enemy whose only job was to steal samples. This would change everything. Here's why. Players couldn't just leave their samples at the evacuation site anymore. The new enemy might steal them while everyone is off doing other things. They'd have to rethink their whole strategy. Maybe they'd need to have someone guard the samples, or find a new way to keep them safe. It would add a new level of challenge to the game. Players would have to balance completing their mission with protecting their valuable samples. We don't know what new enemies might be coming to Helldivers 2 in the future, but the company that makes the game, Arrowhead, has a lot of freedom to be creative. They could come up with all sorts of new and interesting enemies to challenge players. This idea of a sample-stealing enemy shows how even a small change could have a big impact on how people play the game. It would force players to think differently and come up with new strategies. If you are watching this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.